the Big 12 championship. Obviously, now with Texas and Oklahoma gone, a little bit of a power vacuum. Arizona State comes out of nowhere to fill that vacuum this year. Love what Kenny Dillingham is doing in Tempe. But our listeners want to know, between Texas Tech, Baylor, and TCU, who is the closest to winning a Big 12 championship?
I think it's Texas Tech. And it sounds weird to say because those other two teams you mentioned have played for or won a Big 12 title. I think
Sure.
TCU was a co-champion, of course, way back in 2014. Baylor has won 3 in the last 12 years, I think it was. Of course, TCU didn't win it, but they went to the playoff. But I think it's Texas Tech. From where they are on a roster standpoint, they've raised the floor at Tech. Okay, I think they're 23-16 the last 3 years. I'll have to double check that, but I think that's right. People are gonna say 23-16. That doesn't seem great. You know what? That's the best 3-year stretch they've had since the Mike Leach era. Okay,
Yeah.
And they're going to bowl games every year now. Again, not a thing that happened except for like Mike Leach era. At least not since then. So Joey McGuire and company have raised the floor. So that's number one. Number two, Hugh Cohen spent more than $10 million in the portal. And, buddy, they were beating out Big Ten and SEC teams for players. They got offensive line questions. Let's bring in 3 offensive linemen. You got some defensive line help that you need. Let's go get the top edge rusher in the portal. Let's go get three other D linemen. Let's go get a running back. Let's go get some DBs. I mean, they did a terrific job. They were organized. They attacked it. Obviously had money to spend. James Blanchard, the GM there, of course, we know he was flirted with the Notre Dame job and ended up staying. They did it. Him and Cody Campbell, who runs the NIL collective there, did a great job of making this thing go. And so now this is it. This is the all-in year. You got all that talent. You went and got Mac Leftwich, who I think is one of the most underrated offensive coordinators in the country.
Mm-hmm.
You got Sheil Wood, who turned around that Houston defense and made them one of the better units, and certainly one of the better units in the Big 12, and I think one of the better units in the country. That kept them in a lot of games that they had no business being in, considering how futile Houston's offense was. So you got 2 dynamite coordinators. You've got all this talent that you've added onto the roster, onto what was an 8-win roster, a good team that, you know, if you don't lay an egg against Baylor, maybe you're playing in the last week for a Big 12 championship game berth, you know? And that's what's going to be the big thing for Texas Tech is can they get the middle of the season, scratch your head loss off the books, because they've had it twice to Baylor. They had it 2 years ago, I think it was, and they had it last year. They've also had the opener against Wyoming on the road when they lost that one. This year it was, you had to survive to beat Abilene Christian. No disrespect to Abilene Christian, which was actually really good this year.
Sure.
But you had to survive that one, and then you know, without Taj Brooks, obviously didn't look great at Washington State. They've got to come out of the gate quicker. Baylor is in a really good spot too. Sawyer Robertson and Jake Spavital, that pairing has been terrific for them. Aranda got himself off the hot seat. They bring a lot of guys back. From a momentum standpoint, I think Baylor is going to be right in that mix for the Big 12 title. And TCU is the one of the 3 of these teams that we mentioned, probably the one that I feel least confident about. But I think that I actually like a lot of what TCU has going this year. The thing I want to see with TCU is get back to beating good teams, because I think, they let an egg early in the season, especially on that loss to Houston and the really, really tough start that they had, and things were kind of going awry. But I thought they bounced back really, really well. And they won the games they were supposed to. Now I want to see them get back to beating teams at the top of the conference. But Josh Hoover, one of the best quarterbacks, or one of the most productive quarterbacks certainly in the country, I think I think there's a lot to like there too. So maybe I want to see it this year, but I think TCU may have stabilized itself. You know, everything just kind of fell apart after the national championship run season. And you're trying to build the pieces back together, and it looked like this year that it might go off the rails totally, and they righted the ship. So give Sonny Dykes and his staff credit for that. They were able to kind of get some momentum and have a strong finish to the year. And and ended up winning 8 games. If you'd asked me after the Houston loss that they'd win 8 games, I would have told you they're crazy. I would say they'd be a 5-7 or 6-6 team. But Baylor's stabilized. So all these teams I think are going to be in the mix. They're going to be teams that we're going to be talking about in November in the Big 12 title. But if I'm picking one to have the best shot at it, it's Tech, just because of the talent, just because they went out and got that talent, and they've also they're pairing it with a lot of experienced guys. They've coming back, and just 2 dynamite coordinators who I think are really, really great hires by Joe McGuire.
Love hearing the praise for Tech. We're big Tech believers on this podcast, have been for a couple of years now.
Gracious him! How about that?